Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're at one of our apiary sites here in the gloriously sunny and warm Norfolk countryside, which makes an incredible change for us because it's been so cold here in the east and we've really not been able to get stuck into all the jobs that we wanted to do that we would have done a lot earlier last year. So we're kind of playing a little bit of catch up, but it's all okay, it's not too late. And the job today is creating some split colonies. We have some new queens arriving next week, and what we want to do is to create some queenless nuke size boxes with maybe 4 or 5 frames of brood, so that those new queens can come into what is in effect a growing nuke and then start laying almost immediately. And the reason we want to have such a large nuke of brood, if you will, is because we want these queens to go on to our borage pollination in the summer. And everything is now being driven towards the end of this month and into July, so that we can get a reasonable crop of borage honey from our summer honey production. So time is of the essence now. We really need to crack on with this. So I thought it would be quite good to show you how we produce these setups ready to take through into the summer and still produce a crop of honey. Whereas with an artificial swarm, we wouldn't actually expect part of that to produce. What we're trying to achieve here is a split colony where both of those splits, one with the original queen and one with the newly introduced queen, will go on to produce a honey crop for us. What we have done up till now is to add an additional brood box to some of our stronger colonies, with the aim of trying to get the queen to lay in both of those brood boxes, so that we maybe, bearing in mind that we're using these Langstroth hives and that they have 10 frames in them, we may have as much as 14 or even 16 frames of brood spread between the two boxes. And if we have that kind of situation, then that would be great. But what actually we're looking for is maybe 5 or 6 frames of brood that we can take out and use. So it might be a case of simply splitting these colonies in half, where we've got a brood box on top of another brood box, no queen excluder, so the queen can move between the two boxes, and we may well be able to just take that top box off, leave the queen in the original position, so she'll get all the flying bees, and then the new queen will be introduced, and she'll just have younger bees, younger nurse bees, in her colony, in her hive, and then she'll start laying. And the next 3 weeks or so we'll see that brood cycle go through, 21 days for workers, remember. So by the end of this month we should see the emergence of her initial egg laying start to come through, and then bees can go off and forage on the borage. So let's go over to one of the hives, have a look at what's going on and see if we can perform what is in effect a simple split. Well, here we are. We have a honey pour hive. So we've got a super on the top and then 2 brood boxes, and the queen excluder is between the blue super and the light green brood box. Now hopefully we have the queen moving between the brown box and the light green box, because there's no queen excluder there, and that will allow her to lay more eggs throughout those boxes. Now we haven't looked at these for a week now, so don't know what we're going to find. But we've got some bees up in the super, which is always good. Well, I'm not going to inspect the super, not until we get to the end of this process. But what I am going to do is just pop a little bit of smoke underneath the edge, and then we can lift this off. And there's a reasonable amount of weight in that, so we can just pop that down on the floor. And then here we have a brood box that's got plenty of bees in it. Now we're not looking for masses and masses of bees. Well, it's great, but we're not looking for masses and masses of bees here. What we want to do is to have enough bees, enough nurse bees in one of these boxes, so that when we introduce that new queen, she has, if you like, a family already created for her, where she can then go on to start laying eggs. She has bees in the brood box that will look after that young larvae, develop them into adult workers that will then go off and forage, hopefully towards the end of the month and into July. So one of the things we would like to do is to find the queen. So one of my priorities is to try to find the queen, and we can do it one of two ways. I mean, what I'd like to do is to get the queen into the bottom box. So I'm hoping that by inspecting this top box in position, it might encourage the queen to go down into that bottom box. So we'll kind of work our way through, and I expect there'll be quite a lot of stores in here. So if we find that we've got just stores, then we may have to juggle a few frames around, but I'm hoping that the queen will have been into this top box. And you probably saw that those two frames that I've just taken out are full of stores, but this one is nicely laid up with sealed brood, and I don't know if the camera can actually pick this up, but we've got some fairly light coloured brood here, and then there's some darker brood here. Now that's not a problem. What we're actually looking at is brood that's about to emerge. So in this portion here, and in fact, I don't know if you can see, but just here we've got a worker that's just emerging. Her antennae are just poking through the cell. So this area here was laid up first by the queen, and these workers are on the verge of emerging. Now they would be fantastic to put into our new split, ready for their new queen to arrive, because they'll be ready to start work. And this frame we've got lots of eggs, so it looks as if the queen could well be in this top box. And you can see this big area in this frame, and that's mostly laid up with eggs, so we've got lots of eggs in there. And what I really want is to give the split, the queenless split, as much sealed brood as possible. And the reason for that is that sealed brood takes a lot less effort to look after than open brood. So with any luck we'll find some more frames, and it doesn't matter if we have to juggle them around between the two boxes. We can soon shift brood from the top box to the bottom box, so that we have the majority of the sealed brood that we're going to use in our queenless split. So I'm just looking across the frames, trying to spot the queen now. We've also got these rudimentary queen cups. Sorry. If I peel them open, there's nothing in those, so I can just squash those down. It's not a major issue. One or two others, still nothing in those, but I'll just squash them down. And we'll just continue to work our way through, looking for frames of sealed brood. Another nice frame of mostly sealed brood here, so that's quite a good frame that we could use. Again, a darker patch in the middle here, which would imply that we have adult bees in those cells, and they are going to emerge fairly soon. Again, a small patch here, and lots of food stores over here. We just squash those rudimentary queen cups down. So if you're watching this video on YouTube, we have two other ways of catching up with all of the content that we're producing. The first way, and probably the best value for money way, is to check out our Patreon page. If you have a look at our Patreon website, our creator page, you'll find lots more videos on there, a massive back catalogue of videos. We've got over, it must be 1,200 plus individual items of content that we've published there, so well worth a look. But we have also now introduced a YouTube membership page, so if you're interested in having a look at the videos but you don't want to sign up to Patreon, it's more convenient for you to sign up through YouTube, then do have a look at that. We've had one or two messages from people who have said that they would like to look at more videos, but they don't want to sign up to Patreon. So we've listened to what people have asked for, and we've created the membership page specifically for those people that want to sign up via our YouTube channel. So I've just been across all of these frames, haven't spotted the queen, so I'm kind of hoping that I'll be able to spot her in the bottom box. So I'm going to lift this box off and pop it down on top of the super and just move all of the frames across nice and gently. Bees are fantastic, they're really calm bees, doing really well. These were frames of foundation not so long ago, so they've drawn those really well. So that's good news. And then we can just break the seal between the two boxes, and I can lift this down on top of the super. And you'll notice that I didn't put the queen excluder on top of the super to stop possibly the queen that might be in there still going down into the super, and that's because we've got a clear cover board on top of the super which will prevent that from happening anyway. So not too much smoke, because I don't want to drive the queen across onto the sidewall, and if you're looking for the queen, it's always worth trying to do as much as you can with as little smoke as possible, because then the queen's likeliest to stay on the frames rather than being forced to the side. Again, the queen is most likely to be on frames that are either prepared or being prepared for her to lay eggs into. So it's unlikely that she'll be on frames of food stores out towards the edge. Having said that, we have in the past fairly frequently discovered the queen on the first couple of frames that you take out, and very often you take that first frame out to give yourself room, this one that I've placed on the floor here, and the queen ends up being on there. You go through the entire box and then glance down and spot the queen on there. Having said that, I've just glanced down and I can't see her there, so I think she's still in the box. So this is a frame that is mostly sealed brood on both sides. One of the things I do find sometimes a little bit tricky is when it's a bright sunny day and you've got a bit of shade being reflected, being cast by your own body, and then you've got the very bright frame that's in the sun. So I do move myself around a little bit just to check out what's going on. So you'll see me moving the frame across to look at the bees that are in the shadow of my silhouette rather than the bright sunlight. And of course it always helps if the queen is marked, so if you've got a marked queen, then it's going to be that much easier to spot her than if she's not. Having said that, sometimes it just becomes very difficult to spot her regardless of whether she's marked or not, and it can take several trips before you finally see her. One of the things that I do is look down at the next frame that I'm about to take out, just in case I spot a coloured dot on the queen's back on the next frame, and that will alert me to the fact that she's there. So you'll notice I'm not using a great deal of smoke as we go through. So just glancing down at the next frame, she's not there. And sometimes the queen will have the dot removed, so some of the workers will be a little bit unhappy about the fact that you've marked the queen, and they'll go to work cleaning her up and removing it. So sometimes you'll find that you have a queen that you've marked and you think that she's got a really bright dot on her thorax, and then unfortunately when you go back in to look, when you do see her, all that's left is a tiny little outline of the dot that you originally painted on her. Bit of jet flying overhead. No sign of the queen as yet. And the queen is on this frame, but she's not marked. So it's possible that this queen has been a supersedure queen. Now, if I can just pick up, there she is, I can point her out, and she's just here. So she's doing well. So I think that if she's a supersedure queen, she will have been a supersedure queen from last autumn. So let's mark her while we've got the opportunity. And I can just show you how easy it is. Even with these marigold washing up gloves on, the other manufacturers' gloves are available of course, I'm using these primarily to stop my fingers getting stained yellow from the propolis, but also to stop me from ending up with really dry hands. My hands get really dry when I wash them in the wash bucket. So although these aren't the best of gloves to use, preparation is the key. Make sure that your pen is working. Have that to one side. And then I'm just going to pick her up, place her on my index finger, and then mark her by just holding on to her legs with my thumb and forefinger. So we want to get her moving away from the direction that I'm going to pick her up, and I just pick her up by her wings. I mean, she seems fairly relaxed but fairly busy, so she's looking at cells to lay into. So we move her away, and then you have to kind of go in as if you mean it. So you mustn't be too delicate. You've got to grab her fairly quickly. Make sure that you don't crush her abdomen. You don't want to be grabbing her abdomen. And then mark her and pop her back onto the frame. And there we are. She's nicely marked, and we're no doubt we'll spot her next time. So I'm pleased to be able to show you that. And we'll pop that frame back in. So now I'm quite happy that we've got the queen in here. She's on this frame that I've just popped back in. Of course she could just run across, nip across to another frame. I just want to check these last two frames before we move on, and then we'll get into the whole purpose of what we actually came here to do. Look at that frame of pollen. Now, as a commercial bee farmer, I'm not going to hang around normally and look at frames of pollen, but isn't that just fantastic? And that's on both sides. So that's a really good frame of pollen that they will use to feed the young larvae. Remember, pollen is the protein that they need to feed both themselves and the larvae. And then we're into the last frame. It looks like they've gummed this last frame up at the top here. And then we can take this one out. The nectar that they gather is the sugar, the carbohydrate, and the pollen is their protein. So we'll leave that one here. So we've got our queen in this box, so we can move these frames back across, just being careful not to crush any bees as we go. We don't want to cause any undue damage if we can avoid it. Now, we've only got a couple of frames of brood in that top box, so I'm looking for another frame that's got predominantly brood in it. That one's not too bad, but I think this one is better. So this one's better, so I'm just going to shake the bees off. A quick tap and they're gone. That's ideal. Let's have a look at the next one. Again, there's a reasonable amount of brood here. So again, a quick tap down into the box. Keeps the bees in the box, and then we've got a couple of frames of brood that we can add to that top box. Let's have a look at this one more frame. As I said, I'd like 5, but we'll go with 4. That will be fine. So we can move this one across. Give them a little bit of smoke. And now I just need to replace those 2 frames that I've taken out. What I'd like is some frames that the queen can lay into. So I'm just going to pop across to the other box and see what we've got there. So I've got a couple of frames here. They have filled a lot of the cells with nectar, but we're going to pop the super back on this colony. So the cells that are open, they're likely to move that nectar and honey up prior to it being capped. So we've got a couple of frames here to replace the ones we've taken out. So that's great. We can move this group of 3 frames across, and then we can pop this original frame back in. Just shake the bees off. And we've got that sorted. So this can go back on, the queen excluder can settle down on top, and then we're going to place the super back on here. But actually what we're going to use is one of the Techno Set hives. Do take a look at the other videos that I've got showing the Techno Set hives, because they're fantastic hives. And I'll just set it up behind this one just to demonstrate what I'm doing, but it is very much just a case of transferring the frames from that top box across into the Techno Set hive. We've got our 2 extra frames of brood here, and the outside frame that I've just picked up off the floor just to get it out of the way. I'm just going to transfer the rest of these frames across into this hive, and then we're good to go. And here's our final frame. There's plenty of room here, so I don't need to shake the bees off. I would normally shake the bees off so we don't roll any bees, but we have a nice gap there. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 frames in our 10 frame Techno Set Langstroth hive. Get everything nice and tight against that side wall. This colony does have eggs and young larvae in it, so we will have to come back and check for any queen cells prior to introducing a new queen. Otherwise, they're very likely to reject that new queen in favour of their own queen cell. We've had that happen before. So I'm just going to get the feeder and roof. We have an integral feeder that fits on top of this. Again, do take a look at the Patreon page for more details of the Technoset hives. And then we can close them down and come back in about 3 or 4 days' time to check for those queen cells. So we've knocked off all of the bees from the empty brood box, and then we can pop the feeder and roof on and clamp this in position, and then we're ready to leave these until next week, when we'll come back and check for any queen cells. So we've got the entrances open. Always make sure that the entrances are open. Any flying bees are going to come out of this hive and return to their original hive position. So we don't have any issues with that situation. We want the flying bees in this hive. It will only leave the younger bees in this colony, and they're more likely to accept the queen that we introduce. I've made sure that they have plenty of food because they won't have any foraging bees. So we've got plenty of food stores in here for them, so they're not going to starve. And they're good now until next week when we come back and check for any queen cells. All that remains is for me to pop the super back on here. Let's just do that. And with a little bit of luck, now that they don't have the large brood box to have to think about, they can, with luck, fill that super full of late spring, early summer nectar and turn it into honey for us. All that remains is to tighten up this strap, just in case the wind blows the roof, and we're sorted. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. It's a great way of splitting a colony ready for a summer nectar flow and still maintaining a crop of honey from both boxes. In reducing the size of the colony, it will also help to suppress any swarming that potentially could happen. So it works in multiple ways for us. Do take a look at the Patreon page, check out the YouTube membership as well, but if not, we'll catch up again here in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching.